Hey, y'all need a break. Listen to these stories from our /AskReddit, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What's the biggest mistake you've made because you were horny? Was trying to get with a girl in college. We were texting and I asked her what she was up to. She said she was training for a marathon and going to the gym and asked if I wanted to come. I ended up running 9 miles before I tagged out. So now I know how far I'd go to get laid. It's up to 9 miles. And I would walk 4.5 miles. And I would walk 4.5 more. Just to be the man who rolls 9 miles. To fall down at your door. I had a seizure and instead of calling a doctor afterwards, I convinced my girlfriend that I was fine and we had intercourse. Free vibrator. Seriously though, why did it happen? Do you now have epilepsy or maybe were you sick/on drugs at the time? I'm pretty sure it was caused by sensory overload. We were cuddling and tickling, etc. I haven't had a seizure before and it was my only time, so far. I was actually freshly clean of drugs so that might have had an impact, but yeah, I'm kinda crapping myself, didn't expect people to see this lol. Got an adult site membership and forgot about it. 4 months and like $150 later I realized my F up. I knew a guy who ran about a dozen adult sites from the early 2000s. The front end's paywalls were all different themes, different porn sites/companies. But the back end content was all from the same pool of smut. He said many people had accounts on most of the sites, paying separately, multiple times monthly for the same thing. And, they would forget that they subscribed to the sites too, easy money. Sometimes, they'd get calls from the wives asking about what these credit card charges were for. Awkward. Not my biggest mistake. I posted that elsewhere in response to a comment. I did give my beloved childhood teddy bear a facial though. When the post-nut clarity hit I just sat cross-legged on the floor looking at the hot mess of semen and fur I created. Ended up cleaning him via waterboarding but the stains never disappeared. In college, it was a random weeknight. I had started talking to my first girlfriend again. We dated in middle school/freshman year of high school several years prior. She was on trimesters or something, so she didn't have classes that week and was at her parents' lake house. Alone. Truly my parents are gone text, and 5 minutes later my mind was made up and I was on my way to the car. I drove 2.5 hours one way, in the middle of the night, in February, upper Midwest, to meet up with this girl and seal the deal that preteen me set in motion like 7 years prior. It was just alright. What my pent-up dick forgot about was that I had a mandatory chemistry lab at 8 a.m. the next day. It was 3 a.m. when the post-nut clarity hit, while we were smoking some post-intercourse weed. I ended up pulling an all-nighter, we banged again. Because intercourse, and then drove back to my school. On zero sleep, about 6 times the healthy limit of caffeine, and groggy AF from her crappy weed, I rolled into the chem building. Sat there for 10 minutes before I realized no one else is there. This was pre-smartphones, and most people didn't carry their laptops to classes, so I hopped on a computer to verify the schedule, and see the email from the professor that the lab is moved to the next week. She sent it 2 minutes after I followed my second brain out the door the night before. I accidentally put myself in debt by effing my former accountant on his desk and messing up papers. It got cleared up, but it was an awful week and a half. My sister was getting married to my now brother-in-law when I was 18. I was his best man. We were finishing up getting ready at the church and I was in one of the back rooms trying to get my tie tied. His younger stepsister who was my age had been helping out all day and the night before. She was really cute and her and I had been flirty all weekend. She came into the room to get something and I asked her if she knew how to tie a tie the right way. She came over to help, got all up close and was giving me the sexy eyes. It just popped off. We locked the door and got down right before the ceremony. Then later at the reception. Her dad found out later and lost his crap. He wasn't married to my brother-in-law's mom, but they'd been together a long time so I guess she wasn't technically his stepsister. Whatever. He hated me. Every time our families hung out he would be a dickhead. It ended with them breaking up and he moved with his daughter to Missouri. My guy was working his magic, making me quiver and see stars. I was so wound up, I asked for anal despite his size and lack of prep. Great intercourse ends with an anal fissure and blood everywhere. I decided to wank around 9 p.m. on a weekday. It made me sleepy, I fell asleep, missed the deadline for a programming assignment and sent my previously A average to a C-. You were working on your other Python assignment. Swimming down the Craigslist wormhole of desperation and depravity. Craigslist personal ads is how my dad met his now wife. Seriously, they met on Craigslist, dated, moved in together and then got married. They now have a dog and the dogs gets picked up by the doggy daycare bus. Got scammed out of $500 trying to get an escort. Who, among us, would like to hear more of this story? I, For one, would like to hear more of this story. Really stupid in retrospect, obviously, but their methodology was so convincing at the time. So basically texted an escort who sounded pretty convincing. Asked for half up front, $90, which I sent. Showed up at the house and she asked for my escort code before meeting. I didn't have an escort code, so I had to text this dude to go through a process. Had me fill out some forms and asked for like $300 deposit for security. He assured me I would get it back after everything, so I'm like fine. Another form and he asked for an additional $200 as deposit. I only had $100 in my account, so I sent that until I could get more from my other accounts. But since it wasn't the full amount, he said nothing could happen. And I couldn't get a refund. So yeah, I just accepted the L and realized I got scammed. Sucks, but thankfully I didn't get robbed at gunpoint or anything. I have taken a few risks going raw over the years. I raw dogged an adult worker. Just absolutely went for it because I was getting frustrated with the condom and she said I could take it off. Didn't catch anything. Caught something from a girl I had casually seen for 4 months though, go figure. A girl and I were chasing each other for over a year. When one of us was single, the other was not. Finally, we were both single and hooked up. We were having intercourse in her room, her roommate was there. She worked at 8 p.m., so she got dressed and left. Her roommate crawled into bed, and I had intercourse with her. The next day it was over. Wait, so her roommate was in the same room whilst you were having intercourse? If so, then fair play. I was in the Air Force. Everyone in the dorm had one roommate. 12 feet by 12 feet room. It was very common to have intercourse and the roommate was there. Or your roommate having intercourse with his girlfriend. Crap, even your girlfriend's roommate having intercourse with her boyfriend. Either way, she wasn't happy about it. We never spoke again. About 10 years ago I had a double lap dance in the back room of a strip club. They made promises and I gave them my credit card. Nothing happened except me trying in vain to fight a 4-figure credit card charge. I am not a smart man. I was 23 and freshly divorced, bipolar and not medicated. I was in a manic state and sleeping around a lot. This one guy told me he wanted to be in a relationship with me, but he wanted to watch other guys F me. He was white and he specifically wanted black dudes to F me while I sucked his dick. I did it a few times and wanted to kill myself afterwards when the depression set in. I'll keep it short, but I, male 23, went home with this girl, female 28, from the bar, and we stopped by another bar where she almost got into a fight with someone. Yes, I know, I should have left after this, but I hadn't had intercourse in over a year at this point. Once we got back to her place, she started doing hand stuff with me, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but she started to tear up and got the sniffles with a guy, me, she's never met, red flag as well, but again, previous statement stands. Finally, we start talking about what we're into and she says, I think the hottest thing in the world is when a guy busts in me and I hold his child for 9 months. That was the moment when I knew I needed to get out of there. Long story short, she went to the bathroom and I bolted. Left some things at her place, but she was kind enough to return them. Some may say I'm a bad guy because clearly this woman had some underlying issues that she was trying to work on, but in an unhealthy way, but to be completely honest, I was nervous that I may have been forced that night, and so I don't feel bad about what I did. I got scammed and lost about $1,000. This is semi-long story, so I apologize. A few years ago my girlfriend left me after a 3+ year relationship. I survived the first couple of months with hookups and dates to tend to my needs both physically and emotionally. I eventually opted to have another go at the NoFap challenge. I've done it before and it had its benefits at the time. I ended up making it about 70-ish days in the end. This was pretty peak lockdown time as well for COVID, so contact with people was less and less. I was working long hours in a new job during the time and had zero social life at this point. The desperation got more and more intense. I was not myself, I felt like I was an animal in heat. About 10 days before I quit this challenge of mine, I made contact with a woman on a hookup app called Pure. We exchanged numbers and texted for a few days. She sent me pictures, was apparently in her 50s and was looking for a younger man to be at her service. She told me she wanted us to get a hotel room and that she would e-transfer me money to cover both the room and my time. She sent it fairly quickly. At first glance the e-transfer was only an image, but it looked legitimate enough and had my name, date, etc. I deposited it and went ahead with booking the room. Like I said, I was incredibly desperate, so I wasn't thinking straight at all. Then during the day we were supposed to meet. She told me she needed Google Play cards for a work thing, but she wasn't able to handle it on her end. I can't recall why. That she couldn't leave work until it was handled. You got the money I sent you, right? It should cover it. I can send you more later tonight. I'll leave as soon as you get me those codes. I tried checking into the hotel, Made a reservation online initially, but when they wanted to have a deposit on the reservation in person, my credit card was maxed out and they wouldn't accept any other alternative. I sat in their lobby looking up / calling hotels nearby where you didn't need a deposit. While waiting, the woman texts me saying she needs those codes still. So I leave and buy $400 worth of cards, scratch them off in the hotel lobby while texting her the codes. Surprise, one of the codes doesn't work, you'll need to go get some more or I can't come. So I leave again and buy another $300. The woman in the store, I think her coworker flagged it to her after my first visit and recognized me when I came back again 30 minutes later, even told me before running them through, "Hey, I just want to forewarn you right now that there is currently a scam going on right now for Apple and Google gift cards, etc. etc." I tell her it's okay, it's for a friend. I didn't want to hear none of it. I'm not the kind of desperate idiot to fall for such a thing. I get back to the hotel lobby. The clerk decides to accept my deposit via debit one time and one time only. I get into my room, I upgraded to a larger room with a jacuzzi, cost me close to $300 with tax, and sent her the other codes. I even took a tab of Viagra so I could satiate this woman for hours on end. Suddenly she becomes less responsive and is dodging / ignoring my texts. I get a text here and there but only after a couple of hours. It all kinda hit me finally and I had a moment of clarity and admitted to myself that I've just been scammed. I started looking up this sort of scam setup online and there it was. If not exactly the same as my situation but thousands of renditions of it. I texted the woman back telling them I know what has happened and that I'm forwarding all their information to the police. The woman still tried to get more money out of me for the next couple of hours before I completely decided to ignore them since the jig was up. Eventually I made myself a bubble bath in the jacuzzi and bawled my eyes out. Stayed the night because it was paid for and went back home the next morning. 2 embarrassing additions to the story. I told my coworkers I could stay later that night and finish up because I had a date nearby a bit later in the after we would finish. Bragged to one coworker that I'm going to be a sugar baby and I already started scoping out new TVs and a PS5. I was ecstatic in the moment, especially growing up poor. It felt like I finally had some luck in life and that I could catch up. The other embarrassing part was going into the bank the next morning to report the fraud on my account. They had one teller working and the lineup ended up growing huge behind me in the process. Meanwhile there was heavy-duty construction taking place above, it was a new development, and the clerk kept asking me to speak louder or repeat myself, plus we were wearing masks due to COVID. I eventually leaned in as close as I could and said, "Listen, this is extremely embarrassing. Could I please speak to your manager in a private office or could I write this down on paper to get my story across / documented?" They allowed me to write my story down and put it on file / forwarded it to their fraud department. Their fraud department reached out a month or 2 later, cleared me of any wrongdoing and suggested I follow up with the cyber crimes department, or whatever it's called, of the city PD. I didn't, I wanted to leave this event behind me and that's what I've done my best to do. I still feel incredibly embarrassed and ashamed I fell for this, and that my hunger for intercourse drove me to such a place. I gave up the no-fap challenge a few days later after my roommate said to me, "Maybe this is a sign you shouldn't have taken it this far, I don't think it's worth it given the circumstances etc. etc." He was really empathetic and understanding of the situation. We are at least able to joke about it amongst ourselves every so often. TLDR, I met a woman online who sent me a fraudulent e-transfer in exchange for adult services who ended up convincing me to spend $700 on gift cards and a $300 hotel room. Shoved a beer bottle up my ass for pleasure, it got stuck, was too embarrassed to tell the truth at the hospital, so I lied that I was attacked by 2 Albanians, and ended up causing the breakup of Yugoslavia. Thanks for watching. Have you made any horny mistakes that you're willing to share? Drop your story in the comments below and then like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.